What shall I say? I mean, a very good teacher, contributed a lot in publications, so many good publications by so many good publication groups of the country, not only the country, rather abroad as well, and contributed extensively in the outreach program. In fact, he has been one of our pillars here at HRDC AMU. In fact, frequently we invite sir, and despite his busy schedule, in fact, he is kind enough that whenever we invite him, sir gives times to us. So in fact, already we are getting late, so I'm not going to tell any lengthy introduction of sir. So with this short introduction, I would like to hand over the session to today's resource person, my teacher, Professor S.K. Singh sir. So sir, it's over to you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Jamal Saab, and good afternoon to all the participants. I will be talking about the interconnectivity of teaching and research. And as Professor Jamal has said in his introduction, that I have been associated with the teaching and also the research for more than 50 years. So I think my presentation will be really a little bit biased because I am involved in research and teaching both. So what is the connection between research and teaching? Whether a good researcher makes a good teacher or a good researcher makes a bad teacher, or doesn't really matter whether your teacher is doing research or not doing research. It doesn't affect the teaching. Since I can see on my screen there are a lot of participants who have doctor in front of their name, so I'm sure they have done research themselves, and probably they are also conducting research while in the job in whatever university or college you are teaching. So you already more or less familiar with the topic. Maybe some of you are expert also in this topic. But I will bring to you certain aspects of research and teaching which you may not have thought about it, or in view of your career or your being very busy, you take things for granted, some of them. But I think I will expect that after my presentation, you will think about this more seriously, and will try to conduct a mini survey in your own institutions, whether whether the connection between the teaching and research is there or not. If there is a connection, if there is a relation which is positive or negative, or it is of no consequence. So you can, of course, get your experience from your own career, whether your research has helped your teaching or not. The question of research influencing the teaching is a very natural one, and as many people think, including myself, that being a very active researcher improves your teaching. But when you come to think of it very seriously, is that really so? Is being a good researcher really makes a good teacher? Now, after doing some literature in connection with my presentations in this talk and also in other talks, I am not sure. At the end, you will see that this is something which we must think whether we are engaged in research or not. Obviously, you are all engaged in teaching, whatever, 40 hours a week, including all the preparation, which is the norm of the University Grants Commission. Whatever your teaching load, 20 years, 21 hours per week or less in a college or university. Um, whether your own research has helped your teaching or not, whether your teaching has helped your research or not. Some of the things, as I said, you know from your own experience. But after this presentation, I will sort of expect that you do introspection and come to your conclusions. But let me tell you something general, which probably I think all of us should know. Um, we of course knew it from experience, and I am going to tell it in this lecture, especially in connection with the uh, universities and colleges in our home country, and also in connection with the NEP 2020, when there is so much emphasis on various aspects of teaching and research, including innovation, patenting, and also the community service. Of course, there has been some awareness of this in recent years, especially in the United States and the United Kingdom, on interconnectivity of research and teaching. There have been some surveys, some researches, but to my knowledge, no such studies have been conducted officially, either by University Grants Commission or Ministry of Education or the state higher education departments or even the national science academies or anybody like this. But I think it is time to really um, think about it. We already know from our experience, you know from your experience, you must have appeared for your interview everywhere in the job, whether you are assistant professor or associate professor. At every stage, you appear for the interview, and you know that interview, what happens in the interview? Most of the questions are asked about research. What research you have done, how many publications, what is the quality of publication, what is the H index, what is the journals, how many review articles, how many books. I think rarely any question is asked about your teaching, how good you are a teacher, has your teaching been evaluated. So our own system is heavily favored against teaching. It relies more on your research, your initial appointment, your promotions. They're all governed uh, by, 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 by research, while your primary job, the task in the university and college is teaching. I mean, 21 hours of teaching per week or 40 hours, including the preparation for teaching. So if you spend 40 hours a week preparing for teaching, do you have time for a research? And you don't have time for research, and then you are evaluated only on your research. So it is one-sided. So what should be the weightage of research and teaching in your appointments, in your promotions? What is the connection between these two? So these are the questions which bother us, which should bother us, the policymakers as well as the government, rather blindly deciding in favor of research. Even the NEP to 2020 also emphasizes the research component and innovation component, patent component, having projects, in fact, having projects which are useful for community, which are useful for society, and things like that. But are these the aims of higher education really? Or these are aims of universities? Where these aims of the university? Or have we deviated from the aims and objectives of the university as a concept? What are the universities uh, established for? So these are what are the colleges were established for? Or new colleges, new universities are being, what are they established for? So these are the questions which should bother you in the beginning of your career, so that you can put an emphasis. Of course, keeping the realities on mind as well. Uh, you see, today the research is taken to be an integral part of your teaching profession, especially in the universities, also in the most of the colleges. Um, but this was not always so. This evolved uh, when the university system uh, changed from time to time. So my presentation will be based in two parts. Will be divided in two parts. First, I would like to give you some historical perspective of research and teaching in the universities and the connection between these two. And then in the historical perspective, um, you will see why research has been so much weighted against teaching. And then, of course, I will comment, say a few things about what is happening today. Um, about which you already know many things. But I think I would like to put you on a national level. Whatever situation in your university or your college, you should know what is the situation nationwide in bigger universities, in central universities, in well-endowed universities, whether they are private universities or the mm, government universities. You see, uh, as I said, when the university system of higher education started, research was not part of it. Historically, the universities uh, exist today in the form where it started on a European model. You already know that we had ancient university in our own country, Taxila, um, and many other universities which came after that in 7th century, 8th century. Nalanda and other universities around that time during the Buddhist period, they had some component of research because they did work in astronomy and mathematics and logics, and but mainly they were established in as a learning life skills. You should know how to once you go to the Gurukul in the Vedic period, or if you go to Buddhist Bihars, or even the madrasas in Islamic period, 14th, 15th, 17th century. You were supposed to know the life skills so that you can survive in the society, you can survive a good life. You know all the religious texts, you know the religious laws, you know the laws of the country, things like that. Uh, in Greek system or in Western system, also in the Indian system, uh, universities uh, as a center of knowledge evolved later. First thing, you have to learn your life skills, how to be a good person, how to live longer, how to live in the society. These are the basic things, I call life skills. Those are the main aims. But pursuit of knowledge as a aim of the university or college or system started later. Uh, so we already had a system of higher education in our country, which was a mixed system. I don't know how much you know about the history of higher education in India, but let me say in few sentences that originally we had the Gurukul system in Vedic period, where you know that there was one teacher and there were some students around him, and he used to teach what he knew best and what he thought the teachers should know, students should know. And then came the Buddhist Bihar systems, which was more or less same type of system, uh, and then the uh, Islamic system during the Mughal period. Those schools were sort of influenced by what was happening in the Islamic countries, in Arab countries, and again the basic emphasis was on learning the life skills, religious students, and you know that. great, great to be at here. And of course, I said in the beginning we had also in our own system some work done by PhDs in astronomy and logics and mathematics and languages and grammar. I don't want to my those. So that was our system. Similarly, the evolution of university in Western was started as again mainly as a religious center of religious studies in Europe, in really in Italy and France, later in Germany. What is called the Newman model. Newman was the one who sort of deviated and sort of professed that we should learn other subjects beyond religious studies and jurisprudence. So what required as the liberal studies. So so social sciences and languages and things like that. So it started in 7th century by Newman, who is a priest who established some universities. But after that, great revolution came from Germany, where Wilhelm Humboldt, who was a German philosopher, scientist, mathematician, he said that the basic uh, uh, aim of universities of teaching should be supplemented by research, because he said the research is sort of a natural consequence of higher education. So research should be done along with um, teaching in all the universities, and it should be made an important part of the higher education system, and all the universities and colleges should have teaching and research both. So really it was a Humboldt model on which German universities were established. And in fact, later on, our European universities were established, whether it is Oxford or Cambridge or France or Paris University is one of the oldest one, or even in the Italy, University of Bologna, University of Rome. They were the oldest universities. So they were started on Humboldt model. In fact, later on, all American universities followed that model. So really, late 18th century is the time when research became an integral part of the higher education system of the universities. So that were the two models. First model, we have our Indian system, which was a sort of mixture of Vedic, Buddhic, and Islamic system. That's before around 13th and 14th century. After Takshila and Nalanda universities. Later, of course, you know that those were destroyed and the system was gone. The present system of higher education was really started by British people when they established three universities at Calcutta, Madras, and Mumbai in 1857. Uh, but British, in the period of East India Company, they established three universities, the bigger universities, but they were not on the model of the English British universities, because their aims and objectives were different. Their aim in establishing universities was to prepare graduates or to produce graduates who can serve the company, who can serve the British Raj, not for pursuit of knowledge or not for higher education. In other words, just for producing clerks which can support in various capacities the British Raj. So the aims and objectives of our own university system was destroyed. The aims and objectives of the universities in Western period was not followed, but we completely Indian universities were started just by producing graduates, postgraduates who can serve the British Raj in various capacities, in various departments. That is why in the new setup of higher education, there was no research component in Indian universities to start with. Of course, there were researchers, not saying that there were no researchers, because research, teaching, they are all endeavors of human mind. So anybody who is active, anybody who can think, is capable of doing research. Of course, some areas need a lot of funding, a lot of money to produce some results, but there are a lot of areas like philosophy, sociology, social sciences, languages, where you can just produce research of higher quality without spending much money. And so a lot of people are also engaged in research activities on their own. Though there was no research, means that there was no institutional support for research in the university. So no question of interconnectivity between research and teaching. So um, you see, even C.V. Raman, who was the first Asian Nobel laureate, he did research when he discovered Raman effect at Indian Association for Cultivation of Science. That was an institution started by Indians in like today some people start their own institutions. So it was not supported by government. It was not sort of the university. In fact, that Indian Association for Cultivation of Science still exists in Jadavpur and is very active research institution, ranked very highly, and now it is supported by the government. So you see, his own research was really done in a sort of private institution where though no institutional support was there for research. Similarly, Homi Bhabha or even later on, Meghnad Shah was the great scientist at that time. He candidate for Nobel laureate many times. Was also director of that institution later. Even Homi Bhabha, whose whole education was in England, in Cambridge. So they were good researchers. Were either educated in abroad or they were started educated by private institutions, not by the so-called universities of today. So this was the situation. There was very minor research component, and maybe I don't see much record of C.V. Raman teaching undergraduate and postgraduate classes because Indian Association of Cultivation of Science had no classes at that time. Uh, uh, so I mean there was no compulsory research, so there was no relation, there was no interconnectivity between teaching and research those times. There was some, as I said, uh, some of the teachers like Meghnad Shah was supposed to be a good teacher as well as a very good researcher. S.N. Bose, if you are physics or scientist, you know Bose as Einstein statistics or bosons. He was in Dhaka University, so he was a good researcher. He was a very good teacher of international standards. Um, as I said, C.V. Raman was not teaching, doing mostly research. So ever the people in doing research, doing teaching on their own, and then they were very good. So you can say based on that, that the good researchers make good teachers. That statistics is very small. There are very few people. In fact, you can look at the history of your own institution where you are working. If it is an older institution, maybe 50 years old institution, you can look back at the history that 50 years back, what was the situation? How many researchers were in the college? Or even today, how many researchers are in the college? So you see, research was a very tiny part of institutions in early days. What happened after independence? Of course, after independence, people did realize, people means the policymakers, the government officials in charge for education, in charge for higher education, they were really responsible for uh, starting universities and studying higher education. They were aware of the importance of research. So they encouraged it. And research is very important because you see the whole domination of Germany before the World War, or even before the First World War, where Germany was based on this research, because research was made part of higher education system by Humboldt in 1800s. So in the big, to start with, German universities had an advantage because they were very active in research. They were very advanced in research. In fact, they were pallbearers of industrial revolution. So in the Europe, that's why the Europe sort of led the whole world in this area. So research was very important because by research, the Germany dominated the whole world. So even after independence, Indian authorities realized that research is very important part of it. But there are more important things to be done because the aim and objective of higher education in India after independence and even today is not excellence in education, it's not excellence in research, it is inclusion, equity, and access. Because the literacy rate was so low, the education was uh, not very, not everybody was able to get good education. So, first priority of the government was to provide equal opportunity, provide opportunities for education to everybody, which means that the massification of education. The first aim was to expand the education to the whole population, which was a huge even at that time. So research became a subsidiary part, a second priority. First part was to provide education to all citizens. And I said this led to the massification of higher education. Many universities were open, many colleges were open. So the main priority was that we should provide opportunity to each and every person in the country to have some education at some level. The excellence can wait, the research can wait. Of course, as I said, they had realized already that research is a very integral part of our higher education system, and it should be. But whatever research was planned in universities and colleges, there also the emphasis was on the economic development, not pursuit of knowledge, not excellence. So the question which is asked nowadays very frequently that we don't have Nobel Prizes in India, our universities don't count in top 200. The answer is simple. The reason is that we never aimed for being in top 200. Our aim was to provide education to everybody, to provide inclusivity, that everybody should be educated. Whatever research and education component we emphasized, whatever research component we emphasized was also on economic development, not on quality and excellence. So you see why we don't have Nobel Prizes, why we don't rank in the top 200. There's so much cry about it, but because of our policies. So the research was um, dominated by the economic development component. What does it mean? It means that research was concentrated on subjects which can contribute to the economic development, like applied sciences, engineering, to some extent medicine, to some extent agriculture. No, these are the subjects which can enrich the economy. So that is where the research components were emphasized, were concentrated. Of course, you remember that after independence, many research institutions were opened. Like Council of Scientific Industrial Research was one of them, under which now more than 50 research institutions are working, purely doing research. Similarly, Defense Research and Development Organization, DRDO, Department of Atomic Energy, under which development nuclear energy. Later on, ISRO, the space sciences, which we are reading ahead. So these are also applied science and engineering. So to make the country economically strong, the research was diverted to that that area. But nevertheless, it was research. Uh, our policymakers, especially our first prime minister, said that he was very scientifically minded. So he emphasized, he put the scientific temper in our in our constitution, and to develop scientific temper, and many science institutions were open, in which there was no teaching. It was pure research institution to emphasize the research for economic development. Many institutions were open. Good. That was good for economic development. And today we are having an economic boom because of those steps. Uh, research in those areas. So research as a pursuit of knowledge and the excellence was suppressed in the universities and colleges. In fact, that was good for economic development, but that was bad for research. Because what happened, that when these research institutions were opened, purely research institutions, their funding was huge. Because as I said, the main aim was economic development. So a lot of money was put in these institutions. So best minds which could do research went to these research institutions. Not only that, whatever research was being done in colleges and the universities, the brilliant minds which were doing some research in colleges and universities, as I said, since it was a minor part of research, was a minor part of colleges and the universities, not many people were doing. But whosoever was doing moved to these research institutions. Because of the teaching load, they were not able to spend much time. So they thought they can do much better research if they move to research institutions. So the research is they moved to research institutions. So first, the new brilliant minds went to the research institutions. The old brilliant minds, which were doing a little bit research, moved from university to research institutions. So what happened? The universities and colleges who were doing some research were deprived of these people, and the research component almost become minimum in the university. Or become okay. Whatever we were doing in research in the university, that also decreased because most people moved into research institutions. So the research component become very small in the universities and colleges. It all shifted to the institutions. And I can make a comment based on my experience. Probably you know that situation persists even today, because you see most of the awards, most of the higher positions in the higher education system are really taken up by the scientists which are working in these institutions. The Institution of Atomic Energy, or Institution of Space Agencies, or Institution of DRDO, or purely engineering institutions. I will not name, I will not give examples. You can look, you will know, are really headed by the people working in these research institutions, not in the universities. So on the one hand, where universities where bulk of the teaching was done, where most of the students were there, because you have to train the young mind to take the country forward, right? So the young population, which was supposed to be trained by our scientists, by our engineers, or by our teachers, or by our professors, were not there in the university. They had moved. They had moved to places where there were no students, because there There, everybody was a scientist. No, everybody was doing research. It was a big scientist or a small scientist, but nevertheless, they were scientists. There were no students. So this was a very peculiar situation. The place where you needed best minds, where students were there, you had nobody to train them. And the places where these people were working, we had no students. So that sort of situation is started developing after the independence. It's more or so even now. But of course, situation little bit improved when new institutions like IITs or ICERs, Indian Institute of Science and Engineering Research, Science Education and Research were opened, which are now at least conducting both teaching, teaching and research. So you see, what I'm trying to see is that as far as universities and colleges of research, university and colleges are concerned, research component is very, very small. As a percentage, there are very small percentage of people who are very actively doing research, which are very actively doing excellent research of international standards. As I said, you can look into your department, you can look into your own institutions, what is the percentage of people doing research, what is the percentage of people doing good research in your college, in your department. With this situation on the ground level, you are just based mainly on research, not on your teaching. So there is another great difference. There is no opportunity for doing research in your place, but when it comes to the appointment of promotions, you are evaluated based on your research component. And that is why everybody likes to do research, because unless he does research, unless he has something, he produces something to show the research output, he will not be promoted, or there is no incentive for doing good teaching. So that's why, if that is the situation, obviously we expect that good researchers should be good teachers. I will come to that, why you expect that. Of course, as I said, research was supported as a tool of economic development. That is why major support for the research went into science and engineering and medicine and agriculture. And the other disciplines like social sciences, languages, humanities. I'm not naming the subject, there are many, many more subjects in that departments. Lit, right now there is so much emphasis in commerce and management. Of course, management was as a discipline was not there, but nobody was really asking supporting commerce also. I mean, 50 years back. So the research support by the government in non-science, non-engineering subjects were very, very minimal. Whatever support was there, even today, is in the areas what is called socially relevant. So if you are in a non-science subject and you are doing research, or you want to do research and you want to get funding from the government, you should work in areas which are socially relevant. So, for example, if you want to do research in English literature or Hindi literature or Urdu literature or in philosophy or in other subjects like that, you have to be socially relevant. I don't know what does that mean. Of course, if you are working in areas of commerce or working in sociology or working to some extent in psychology, I can understand what is socially relevant. But of course, if you're working in the other subjects of humanities, arts and social sciences, languages, what is socially relevant? So again, the research support in those areas uh, which are socially relevant was the only ones which were supported. So in your department, suppose you're working in political science department or department of sociology, um, I think you should be working in those areas which are socially relevant, only those will be supported. So again, what I'm saying is that not only sciences, but also in humanities, uh, the sort of aim of research activities was not for pursuit of knowledge or for excellence, but meant to be socially relevant, skill development oriented, uh, job, what we call job oriented, those sorts of things. Now, so the question is that at the government level, at the policy level, uh, what is what type of interconnectivity between teaching and research is provided? It's very strange, as I said. In the new education policy 2020, if you reach, there's so much emphasis on research, innovation, patents. Question is asked why you are not in 200 top universities, why there are not Nobel Prizes, why we are not visible at international level. So uh, you will be noticed at international level when you do some work of excellence. Not if you develop a new way of developing a Goa gas plant. I think that you will not get international visibility by doing that. So our priorities have been completely different. And at that same time, uh, we want to be very active in research in socially relevant subjects. Our total population of teachers or our uh, whole education system caters to many subjects. Not all subjects are equally relevant for economic development. So whatever subjects are relevant to economic development, where research is supported. So this question of interconnectivity should be asked only for those subjects. Whether what is the interconnectivity between research and teaching? Should it be asked only for science subjects? Only these should be asked for engineering subjects? Why this question is being asked? Why this curiosity is being raised for subjects in like philosophy? That what is the connectivity between teaching and research? While the research in philosophy is least supported by your institutions, by your department, even by government. Anthropology, of course, anthropology has become important in the last 20 years because of various reasons. I don't want to go into that. Archaeology and anthropology has become important in the last 20 years. So you see, now you realize that the question, which I said, as from my own experience, I always thought the research it should be related with the teaching, and good researchers should be good teachers. But the question is cannot be asked in general, because there are certain areas in which nobody talks of research. If you're a good teacher, uh, I think you are should be recognized at the national level just by based on your teaching abilities. How many teachers, how many students are trained in the subject? irrespective of what research you have done or whether you have done any research or not. So you see this question of connectivity, of interconnectivity of teaching and research, which is asked in general, which is supposed to be a very innocent question, right? What is the connectivity between teaching and research? What should be the connection? It's not that innocent question. There are a lot of structure in it. I'll come to this in a moment. But before this, let me tell you about my own bias. The bias because I am a physics teacher. Physics is one very active area of research at international level, not only at national level. So I personally feel that research is intimately connected with teaching, like Humboldt felt, like the feeling on which all the Western universities were established. Because research experience makes teaching more meaningful as they are both related at conceptual level. If you don't have a good concept, you cannot do concept of the subject, you cannot do research. And obviously, if you have a good concept of subject, it's likely that you will be a good teacher. Of course, if you cannot speak well, then you cannot be a good teacher. But mostly, if you are a if you are in teaching profession, somebody has tested that you can express yourself well, you can talk to students in a way that they can understand better. So communication skill is taken for granted if you are in the teaching profession. So if your concepts are clear, then obviously you will be a good teacher. And research cannot be done without having good concepts. So my feeling is that research and teaching are correlated. There is a good connection, and good researchers should be good teachers because they are both related at conceptual level. Research and teaching are compensatory to each other because both are related to our intellectual development. As it is often said, that if you are a knowledgeable person, it is said in our shastras also, in our scriptures, that knowledge should be spread. And how the knowledge could be spread? Only by teaching. So if you have good concepts, good knowledge of a subject, then it is more or less a duty as a human mind to spread that knowledge. So again, this pursuit of knowledge, the research is connected with the teaching, because having whatever good knowledge to yourself is not good for the society. So if you have some knowledge, excellent knowledge about a subject, it is better to spread it to your students through teaching. So a researcher, good researcher should be a good teacher. Moreover, as a researcher, you know, at least in your subject, in your field of interest, that what topics in your subject are routine topics. What topics in your subject lead to advancement of knowledge. You know that as a researcher. If you don't do research, you will not know which are the subjects, which are the topics in your subject which could lead to the advancement of knowledge. So if you are active in research, then you can identify those topics in your subject which lead to the advancement of knowledge. So you can really emphasize those topics in your curriculum while teaching to the students. And some topics will be as a routine topic, but you can pick up those topics in your subject which will lead to advancement of knowledge. and you can spend more time on it explaining to the students. So this identification can be made only by those which are good researchers. Uh, Again, if you are a good researcher, which means yourself and a research guide, good researcher really means that you are doing good research yourself and you are good in guiding the research to the students. Not only the students, but with your collaborators. You might be collaborating in research with your colleagues in your department or with some colleagues in other department with a similar interest. Because there are subjects, to give you an example, there are several topics which are common between physics and chemistry, between physics and mathematics, between physics and engineering, between mathematics and engineering. So you maybe have collaborators in other departments. And collaboration means, 3-4 people at university, at college. I'm not talking about the international collaboration these days where there are thousands of people in one collaboration. Collaboration is done by remote. I'm not talking about that. It's a traditional type of collaboration. So you by being active researcher and a good researcher, you learn how to collaborate with people, how to work in group, how to work in group of 4-5 people. Because you see, group work is very important in any subject or any topic or any field, even in the governance. So research, a good researcher had good collaborators. He knows how to collaborate with the colleagues, how to collaborate with the students. More he likes to, when he guides the students, he comes in close collaboration with the students. So he knows how to deal with the students better than a teacher who is not doing research. So he knows how to interact with the students at the personal level. That can happen only when you are a good researcher. You have 3-4 students, you have a weekly meeting or monthly meeting, you talk with them, you discuss with them. So you develop a different attitude towards your students if you are a good researcher. That helps when you conduct a class. How does it help? Because it helps in a way that you don't become very arrogant in the class. You don't scold the students. You realize the value of the students. If a student in your class of 50 asks a stupid question, you don't lose temper. He's a nice student. He's not supposed to know things as well as you expect them. A lot of students could be below the knowledge level of your expectations. That you learn while you are guiding the students in a close collaboration. So that helps you behave better in a class of 50 or class of 60. Because you must have experience, the class of 50 at 10% will be very, very rowdy students, which will difficult to control. So you will have easy way to handle them if you have experience of working closely with the students. So that helps you become a good teacher. Of course, being a researcher helps you develop a critical and penetrating approach to understand any subject. Moreover, as I said in the beginning, research and teaching both are intellectual activity. They are related at the intellectual level. Because research, what are the components of research? Uh, Components of research is to identify problems uh, and issues. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, sure.
Can you hear me? I think
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
no problem
Yes,
in
sir.
hearing, right? Listening to this. Okay.
No
So
problem,
as
sir.
a researcher, you know how to identify the problems and to find ways to solve them. Not only that, to develop skills, either by training or by new skills, either by training or by self-study. And moreover, the hard work, because research work is time bound. Because if you are funded by some organization, you have a project for 3 years or 5 years or 1 year, depending upon your short-term project or long. So there's a time limit under which you have to produce results. So because of time limit, you become you have to work hard because you have to produce results. So the habit of hard work develops as a research scientist. Uh, so these sort of comes into your habit. The approach to a given problem, scientific approach, becomes a habit of a researcher, at least in its academic life. It may not become a habit in, at home or in daily life, but at least in academic life, it becomes a habit. And obviously, with this template, you will be a good teacher. Uh, how the research can help in teaching, I will come later if I have time. But let me tell you how the
Sir, you are not audible.
आई थिंक सर का नेटवर्क चला गया।
Hello, welcome back. Hello, can you hear
Yes,
me?
sir.
Okay, I'm sorry because some disturbance. So we are back.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So I was explaining how research could help you being a better teacher. There are few points how the teaching could help become a good researcher. Few points I would like to mention. Uh, you see, especially your postgraduate students, um, since they're large in number, they may range from 10 to 30, depending upon what your subject is, or even larger if you are in some other subjects. But as I said, since research has become mainly a profession of science and engineering subjects mainly, not saying that in humanities and social sciences they're researchers, but the research population is more concentrated on the subjects based on innovation and based on economic development. When you interact with postgraduate students, you can get new ideas while interacting with the students. It is my belief, my experience, that in many cases, uh, some of your students, I'm not saying every year in your class, but some of your students in a span of 4 or 5 years would be smarter than yourself in their thinking, not in experience and knowledge because they are very young, but in their thinking, they may be smarter than you, they may be brighter than you. And while interacting with them, you can get ideas. So that way, the teaching helps in getting your new research ideas just by interaction with the students. That's one point. While interacting with the students, especially in PG class or even in the advanced undergraduate classes, you can pick the students for you as a potential research scholars, potential research students. So really, you don't have to grope in dark to getting brighter students. So you can identify brighter students for your projects, for your research in future. So you can identify those students uh, quite early. Uh, Obviously, if you are doing research on uh, in sciences, on instruments, developing prototypes, or if you are doing on projects in other subjects, non-science subjects, which are based on survey or based on field work, you can give, as I said, as a trial basis, you can work at the postgraduate level and you can see how good your ideas are. So you can really do a preview of your ideas by trying them on the students or postgraduate classes. So you know whether to take those ideas, how seriously to take these ideas further. Most important is while interacting with the students, you get to better communication skills. Uh, Also better ways, you find better ways to handle the audience, whether you are talking in a conference or workshops. So though you may be a good researcher, you may be a good teacher also, but you may not uh, uh, be able to face uh, audience which are not very sympathetic to you. So in a conference or in an international conference or a national conference, uh, because something, if you are presenting your work and it is being criticized, you know how to keep your calm, how to answer. So this sort of attitude is developed while teaching a large class. As I said, in a large class, always there are some unruly students. disturbance making students, so you know how to handle them. So teaching helps you how to control the audience in a conference or in a in a workshop at national or international level. So some of the benefits of teaching and research. Now let me come to the very crucial question in the last 15 minutes is the question with which we started. And the question comes to your mind naturally when you ask about interconnectivity between teaching and research. So is there any relation? Is there any correlation between teaching and research? Well, if there is a correlation, is it positive or negative? Which means good researchers make good teachers, or good researchers make bad teachers, or it really doesn't matter. As I said, there are three possible answers. As I said in the beginning, Humboldt's idea to start with was that research should come naturally to teachers because both are intellectually connected at a higher level. I will give you another example of a Nobel laureate in economics. Who was a mathematician, worked in game theory. His name was Nash. If you don't know, I will like to tell you there is a very good book and very good movie, Hollywood movie called Beautiful Mind. If you have not seen it, please see this picture about Robert Nash, who won Nobel Prize for Economics. He developed game theory, the game theory which is applicable to business, which is applicable to war, games, the Cold War especially. So he strongly felt, early 19th century he was working, he strongly felt that there should be no teaching done in the universities, and university should be completely for research, intellectual activity. Teaching should be delegated to the schools, to only the teaching institutions. So as I say, there are extreme views, and I'm sure that in your own mind also there will be two extreme views. Many will be thinking that there is a correlation which is positive and negative. Positive. As I said myself, I feel that a good researcher should make good teachers. So there is a natural positive connection. But I said in the beginning, but is it really so? What's the ground reality? And I will tell you later what is the result of the very few studies which have been made in the United States and United Kingdom. What is the result? But let me explain to you, it is a very difficult question to answer. Why? First, how do you judge a good teacher? What are the parameters which determine good teaching? Nobody has devised so far any parameters to judge good teaching. Is this the class, the result of the class? Or is this discipline of the class? Or it is the attendance of the class? It is popularity of teacher. What is criteria to determine a good teaching? You know, unless you determine those criteria, you cannot compare whether a researcher scores higher on those parameters or a researcher scores lower on those parameters as compared to a non-researcher. So unless you define what are the criteria for deciding a good teacher, you cannot answer this question. For example, like in most institutions, a teacher is supposed to be examiner himself. So if he gives a very easy paper, result will also be very good. So he may be a bad teacher in a sense that students don't like him, but if still everybody gets good marks, result will be good. So the good result does not guarantee that teacher is good. Similarly, the discipline. If a teacher maintains good discipline, a calm and quiet class, everybody is listening carefully to the teacher. Does it mean he's a good teacher? Not necessarily. So, think about this. I mean, this is no criteria. Discipline, if a good discipline is maintained, it is a good teacher. I'm not sure. All of us have been students in our own life. All of us have our own ways to judge a good teacher, who's a good teacher, who's a bad teacher. So there is no fixed criteria. So unless you determine what should be the criteria for determining a good teacher, good teaching, unless those parameters are quantized, that a researcher gets 80 marks on this, 80 marks on this parameter, 80 marks on this, and non-researcher gets less, you cannot judge that. Similarly, on the research front also, how do you define a good researcher? Is the person who publishes more papers is a good researcher? Or a person whose the quality of paper is very good is a good researcher? If that is the criteria, then who decides the quality? Is a researcher who gets many awards is a good researcher? It's difficult to answer because awards are decided on many more criterion than the merit. So even the criteria of a good researcher is also not well defined. Because whenever a person is given award for good researcher, there is always a controversy. So unless you define the parameters of a good teacher, parameters of a good researcher, you cannot compare. It's difficult to compare. You can still, apart from all these uncertainties, some teachers are good or well known, no matter what the criteria. Some researchers which are good researchers also known, no matter what the criteria. But as a researcher yourself, as a teacher yourself, you know that it is a difficult question. Parameters to be decided are difficult. Comparison is difficult. That's one problem. The other problem I hinted in my presentation before. Does this correlation between teaching and research depend upon the subject? Is this correlation depends whether you are asking questions for science subjects, for engineering subjects, or for medicine, or for sociology, or for political science, or for Hindi, or for Urdu. So the results will be different for different language, different subjects. For example, for a medicine, to give an extreme example, in the medical college, if the doctor spends more time on research, obviously he spends less time on OPD, less time in operation theater. He's not available to the patients, so he becomes a bad doctor, becomes a bad teacher, even though he's a good researcher. So similar things are there in other subjects also. But in a subject like Hindi literature or English literature, I mean, the difference is not so much. A good researcher could be a very good teacher also, because both are intellectual activity. He needs separate timings to do research and separate timings to indulge in in good teaching methods. Both involve reading and reading and reading. So there is a positive. So does it depend upon the subject? So obviously a general answer cannot be given unless you tell me what the subject is. Does it depend upon the institution? Because some institution may be very strict that you have to come here at 10 o'clock and go to by 5 o'clock. You have to spend the whole time in the college, full time in your department, whole time in a laboratory of your classroom. Some institutions may be very liberal. They may allow you freedom that you spend the time whatever you needed for your teaching. The rest of the time you can depend upon research. So depending upon the administration of the institution, the correlation could be different between teaching and research, depending on how much freedom you have to do research, how much freedom you have to do your own teaching. Does this correlation depend upon the gender? For males, it is a relation between teaching. A good researcher is a good teacher or not. Does the funding affect the relation between teaching and research? Obviously, to give you an example, if a researcher gets good funding, so obviously, if he gets good funding, then normally most of the institutions, college and university, you don't have good working conditions. Like you don't have good furniture in your room, you don't have air conditioners, you don't have other facilities, you don't have a well-equipped room for your sitting. But if you have a research project, from research project, you can buy an air conditioner, you can buy good furniture, you can have a good light, so you can spend more time on teaching. So if you get a good researcher, you get good funding, you can be a good teacher because you have all the facilities. But on the other hand, if you're a good researcher, you spend more time on research, you spend less time on teaching. So students complain that you don't come on time, you don't have to take classes. So good funding for research can cut two ways. It can make you a good teacher, you can make you a bad teacher also. As I said, two aspects. So increased funding, you have to spend more time on writing projects, more time on writing reports, more time on attending meetings. You will have less time on teaching. So more funding could affect your teaching. So these questions are there, which are difficult to answer. Again, the great expansion in education. What happens to great expansion in education, especially in the colleges or in the smaller universities? There are more students intake, there are more sections, your teaching load increases. So obviously, your teaching load increases, research goes down. So when you get good researcher funding, then spend more time on research, then you skip some of those classes and delegate to your students. So you see the expansion of education, massification of education also affects the teaching. Most important aspect is what is the student's response? That's the most important. You have to ask students, what do they feel? Among their teachers, are the teachers who are active in research are good teachers? Are the teachers who are not doing research, spending all the time on teaching, are good teachers? So you have to take input from the students. That is more important rather than taking input from officers. So what are the results of the studies? As I said in the beginning, there are no such results no such detailed studies in India, so I cannot quote. But I can give you results of the study done in the United States. Many studies done for many years in last many times, 3 or 4 times in the last 25 years. In England, done many times. In Canada, no studies done on the national level, but many universities have done study on their own, like you can do it in your own college. Similarly, Australia and New Zealand, those have been done because you see, the word is spread because when this word is spread that good researchers are spending more time on research, are not spending time in the class, then the officers, then the policymakers worry. Why should we spend more money on research if the researchers are not depending time on giving time on teaching? They should quit the job and go to a research institution doing full-time research rather than do research in a teaching institution like a university. So these were the questions which were raised, and that is why those studies were done. And you can really guess the result. The result is that no definite conclusions can be reached. In fact, many studies done, some studies said there is a very positive connection between research and teaching. Some studies said there is a negative correlation between research and teaching. And some studies resulted in the result that really there is no relation. Whether you are a good researcher or not doesn't affect your teaching. So all three types of researchers, all three types of results are available. But we have to do something about India. What happens in India? As I said in the beginning, I have a very strong belief in the Humboldt thinking that a good researcher should be a good teacher. But after going through all these studies in various countries, I have doubts. In my own institutions, I have seen that some good researchers are very good teachers, but some good researchers are very bad teachers. They neglect teaching. They don't. They avoid students. On the other hand, there are good researchers who engage with the students, who interact with the students. So it's very difficult question to answer. Obviously, some things are very clear. First, there is a stronger correlation, whether it is a positive or negative. Well, there is a stronger correlation at postgraduate level than at undergraduate level. And that correlation is positive. That good researchers are good teachers at PhD level. But undergraduate level, there is no definite conclusion. Various studies give all three, but there is a trend in postgraduate education that there is a positive correlation between research and teaching. Again, you can guess. Other result is that this correlation depends upon the subject. Like the correlation is positive in postgraduate level in science subjects, but at undergraduate level, the correlation is positive in arts and social sciences. Again, research funding, the increased research funding has negative effect on teaching. That is very, very clear. Statistically, as I said, not everybody who is a good researcher becomes a bad teacher, but statistically, the correlation is negative by research funding. One gets more money, then less time on teaching. Again, the correlation is negative with awards. If some person gets good awards, prizes, is honored for his research, then he has no time for teaching. So incentive for research leads to sort of decrease in teaching quality. So I know a couple of examples by personal experience that some of the Nobel Prize winners, once they get Nobel Prize, they don't get time to teach for almost 1 or 2 years, because once they get Nobel Prize, they are invited at so many institutions at the world level, at the international level, that for almost a year or two, they are just traveling around the world giving lectures and so on and so forth, and they don't teach. In fact, they don't do even research for almost a year or two after they get Nobel Prize. So, see, getting awards even at the national level, makes him go round and round and give lectures in various places, and he neglects his teaching and research and other duties. So, increased funding increased recognition uh, has an adverse effect on teaching. Uh, Now let me come to this. What is the student perception? What is the student intake? As I said again, there is not much study on this, but the 5 मिनट ओवर हो गया, खत्म कर देते हैं। MCQ है। अच्छा, ठीक। So similarly, the result you can expect. I mean, first, the statistics is very small. As I said, some studies have been done, but the student intake student intake is still less. So whatever study has been done, there the result is that correlation is very small, but it is positive. Student intake. But what is surprising is, I would like to emphasize here, and I emphasize it in other places also, that most students are not aware about their teachers, especially in undergraduate level, or even at postgraduate level. They are not aware which of their teachers are active in research. So there is no contact between students and teachers at that level where they know about their teachers. So I think it's high time that teachers who are doing research should also educate their students, even at the undergraduate level, that what they are doing, what research they are doing, how important is their research, if they have done something important. So apart from teaching their classes, in their interaction with the students, they should also tell about their own work, as far as their own academic work, as far as research is concerned, so that students can really distinguish that this teacher who is very good, or is planning a lot of things, spending more time, is also very active in research. So this communication is lacking. So I think one of the important things I'd like to convey, that when you teach your class, whether undergraduate or postgraduate class, please teach your students also about your own work, what work you are doing, what research work you are doing. It is importance, it is of national importance, or it is of international importance, it is of great importance, or it is small importance. So you tell about these things to your students so they have a way to differentiate between the teachers who are active in research and teachers who are not active in research. So I think I have been told that I am already over time, so I'll stop here. Unfortunately, there is no time for feedback questions, but please keep in mind that in future, you look around yourself, in your department, in your institution, whether you can answer this question in a better way than what has been answered at national or international level, and engage in your students in a better way than just going to the class and giving a lecture and leaving the class on time. So thank you very much for your patience in listening to me. I am told that it's your last day, so probably you are already very tired of listening to lectures. And thank you for listening to me as the last lecture. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll stop at this.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. But if you have any question,